Okay, sorry if the lighting gets weird sometimes. I rearranged my room, now my bed is near the window. Also, please don't ask what's going on with my hair and why I look like I'm trying to cosplay a Sonic character. I cut it shorter and now it just kind of flicks upward like this on its own. And just don't bully me, okay? I'm really sensitive, guys. Okay, there's been some news about Japan going around on the internet. And it's about these very specific signs they've been putting up as a result of Westerners, specifically black people. They're filming these dance videos, which would be harmless if they weren't doing it on packed buses and trains and sliding on the floor and making everyone uncomfortable. And naturally, this caused a big uproar of debates and complaining and blah, 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 because of the reaction of the Japanese putting up these seemingly offensive signs. And as per usual, I feel like this topic is being pushed to view only through one lens or through one narrative, and also through certain political ideals. I just feel like every time something like this comes up, it is never fully viewed the way that it needs to be viewed from both sides, because somebody is constantly trying to push their own narrative rather than taking the time to look at everything that this topic encompasses. So naturally, I'm going to try my best to do that, as well as teaching you all a bit of psychology today. So make sure you have your textbook out and you're taking notes, because I will be testing you next week. But before I go into anything, I want to start off with a few personal experiences I had that allowed me to view this situation from different perspectives. The very first story may not seem very relevant, but you'll see why it is in a second. So my very first year in college, my second semester as a freshman, I'm incredibly antisocial, incredibly introverted. I don't like being around people at all, but I'm trying to force myself out of that comfort zone. So one time there was this guy that asked me on the school's discussion app. There's like a forum page where you can talk to other students and make friends and stuff like that. So we were chatting and he asked if I wanted to hang out with him and go to the game room with him. And even though I was very reluctant and I don't really like hanging out per se, because I don't really like people that much, I forced myself into it because I wanted to get myself out of that comfort zone, as I said. But immediately I thought badly of this guy. I immediately thought he was just gonna be really perverted, a bunch of sex jokes, just make the whole thing uncomfortable. So on my way there, I have that in my brain. I'm like, all right, just, be ready for everything. I met up with him and he was nothing like that. He was mad chill, didn't bring up any inappropriate jokes. He literally just wanted somebody to play games with, if I'm being honest. But it was actually a really cool experience. And I've never been to the game room before because I never had any friends or anybody to go with. So it was really nice spending the afternoon doing something a little bit different that I don't normally do, stepping outside of my comfort zone, making an acquaintance. We never talked to each other again after that, so I can't really call him a friend. But everything that I thought about him, because he was a guy, was wrong. And when I told him that, I had to head out and leave, he was like, all right, cool, thanks for coming out, see you around. And walking back to my car, I felt very guilty. I felt very bad about my wrongful assumption about this guy simply because he was a man. But more specifically, I felt guilty because I know what it feels like to be profiled like this. And yet I had still done it to someone else. It happened when I went to a new beauty supply store in an area I wasn't familiar with. So I went to the shop, minding my own business, shopping for what I need. And one of the workers are very obviously tailing me, like, walking down past the aisles perpendicularly, if that's a word, glancing and watching me and making sure that I'm not doing anything I'm not supposed to. I guess they thought I was trying to stuff a bunch of got to be in my panties and run out the store without paying. And it wasn't like an occasional glance. It was like, I'm following you around the store and I'm making it obvious. Because I was black, they were profiling me and saying, all right, keep your eye on that one. She's probably going to steal. And obviously I was offended by this, so I straight up left without buying anything. It was a very uncomfortable feeling. I did not appreciate it at all. And I was like, I'm not going to give business to people who think I'm a criminal. And I'm not the only person who had this experience, because if you go to certain reviews for certain beauty supply stores, you will see a lot of black people will say the same thing, as in the profiling here is bad. And now I'm actually very wary on going to new beauty supply stores without checking the reviews first. So of course, as upsetting as this is for me, understandably, they're acting this way because of past experiences. Because unfortunately, when somebody steals from a beauty supply store, 9 times out of 10, it's somebody who looks like me. So in psychology, we would refer to something like this being schema. Schema are the rules and categories the brain creates to group similar information together. It is a mental process that is working the day you are born and for the rest of your life, using past experiences to store that information into your schematic memory. The brain's ultimate goal for this is to minimize the amount of effort it takes to code and store information if that information is similar to previously stored information. So just for a quick example, Sally is a little girl whose mom has a pet dog. That dog is the only 4-legged creature Sally has seen in her entire life. So her brain has created the schema, dog. So one day, Sally and her mom are going for a walk in the city, and Sally sees a four-legged creature crossing the street, and she says this. Oh, Mom, Mommy, look, it's a dog, Mommy, dog. Oh, good job, that is a dog, Sally, good job. Then she sees a second four-legged animal crossing the street, and she says this. Look, Mommy, look, another dog. Good job, Sally, that's another dog. Then she sees a third four-legged animal crossing the street, and she says this. Mommy, look, another dog. No, Sally, that's not a dog. What you mean that's not a dog? It can't be a human. It don't look like you with your busted wig. Oh, I know a dog when I see one. It's got four legs and a tail. It's gotta be a dog, fool. How you wearing those thick glasses and you still can't see? I know what a dog is, Margaret. It's a dog. So now the brain is like, whoa, what do you mean, Mom? What do you mean that's not a dog? It has four legs. So now it has to take more time to encode new information. Okay, so it's a four-legged animal, but it's not a dog. Mother says it's a cat. So now the brain has created a new schema for cat. This is called discrimination. It's distinguishing one set of information from another based on their differences. So the brain has successfully distinguished two different kinds of four-legged animals. So a couple of years go by, and Sally interacts with many different dogs and cats. And she's seeing now that while they both have four legs and a tail, they are still different. They act differently. All the cats that she meets are seemingly entitled. They don't like to get touched very much. They'll often turn away and run away from her, and they basically look down on all of humankind. And all the dogs that she ends up meeting are very lovable, they're playful, they bark a lot, and then they're stupid. Very stupid in the way that they try to eat absolutely everything that can actively kill them. Once Sally makes these distinctions, she's now creating two separate categories for dog and cat on top of the schema that she's already made. Now she knows that every four-legged thing that looks like this is a dog and acts like your average dog, and every four-legged animal that looks like this is a cat and acts like your average cat. Sally's brain has now made generalizations. She's now categorizing information based on their similarities, so now her brain doesn't have to use as much brain power when she sees one of these animals walking by because it's already encoded in her brain. For everyday language, we normally call these things stereotypes. So the point of me telling you all this was not just to yap about psychology, I promise, but it's for you to understand why we work the way that we work down to the science. We are programmed to take pre-existing information and use it to judge and predict future experiences. So this psychological discrimination and generalization aren't necessarily bad things, and they're actively being used to minimize brain power where we don't need it. It's this type of information that helps us to prepare for future events. It is what humans use on a daily basis, and it is currently what the Japanese are doing. Unfortunately, this is what they're repeatedly seeing. People of a dark skin tone being obnoxious on the streets, disrespecting their culture, and making the citizens uncomfortable. So now, unfortunately, their brains have created a schema for us, and they're now responding based on that information that was encoded in their brains. So when you get down to like the specifics and the cognitive processes, you can better understand why we do these things in the first place, why they happen, and how frequently it's happening on a daily basis. So it's very easy to understand where they may be coming from with their reactions based on this whole experience. However, on the other hand, also, whatever other transition words I can use, we have to see things from the other side. Black people, understandably, may be upset about this because of the further generalizations of us in people's brains, resulting in mistreatment. Sure, understandably, schema tells you that Black people are most likely to steal from beauty supply stores. Does that make it okay for you to follow me around the store as if I did steal something from your store? No, because I haven't done anything wrong. There is a big difference between using previously encoded information to be prepared for a possible outcome next time versus deeming that outcome as a 100% possibility and responding like it is. Just like how I wrongly 100% thought the outcome of me meeting up with this guy was me going to be very uncomfortable and him making a bunch of inappropriate jokes was not true. It wasn't fair for me to make that possibility a sure reality before this guy even got a chance to prove himself, because he wasn't like that at all. He was one of the coolest guys I've met on campus so far. Yes, our brains use discrimination and generalization to speed up brain processes, and it's just a part of our programming, but we're not computers, We can override that programming and recognize that while our schematic memory was made to be efficient, it isn't always correct. We have to learn to separate our personal bias and feelings with reality, the true reality that we experience. You can't just blame all of it on, well, that's just our psychology, that's just how our brain works, because that's exactly how things like racism and sexism and all the other isms come to pass, because we didn't bother to check the generalizations that were being made in our brains. Our brains go through a cycle of generalization, discrimination, as the example I gave you earlier. Sally once thought all four-legged animals was a dog. Generalization. But she then realized, no, there's multiple four-legged animals. Discrimination, cat and dog. Then she generalized, okay, all dogs are like this, all cats are like this. But soon she's going to realize that's not the case, and once again has to discriminate against different breeds of dog. You have the poodle, you have the chihuahua, you have the pit bull. They aren't all the same. The problem is our brain stops discriminating when they find that there are no more differences in anything. We need to further discriminate to push past our biases and generalization of a group of certain people. It seems counterintuitive, but that's just the way that humanity is. If it's one thing I learned in cognitive psychology, is that we are very, very counterintuitive beings for some reason. So having certain signs and certain things in Japan that portray a certain message, it's not super surprising to see why Black people would be upset seeing that. It can be very frustrating at the aspect of other people ruining for us and furthering the generalization without discriminating down to the individual themselves. And whenever this conversation comes up, you always have those people in the comments who are like, oh, well, if it really bothers you guys that much, then why don't you take accountability for your people? I really hope that's not a dude saying this. Aren't y'all the same ones who sit here and whine, oh, well, it's not all men, like whenever a woman gets attacked and then they all start getting upset at men because of that generalization that we were talking about? Of course, I'm not saying that it's, justifiable to generalize in that way. I'm literally arguing against it, but I'm saying, can we not say the same for you and hold your men accountable, even though, that's not fair, because it's not like you're in control of the actions of all men, yet here you are talking about you Black people need to hold accountability for your Black people. It's so funny the way that logic just completely becomes nullified when it doesn't suit your narrative. What do you want us to do? Go to the hood and start knocking on doors and preaching about how these generalizations and the schematic memory and all this other stuff is making us look bad in America? Do I look like I'm trying to get jumped? First of all, I'm an individual. I don't have to hold accountability for anybody just because we're the same color. Just because we're all Black doesn't mean I have to take the fall for these lunatics who are defaming our name. Because how is that fair? That's the equivalent of being in elementary school and everyone having to sit down and not play dodgeball anymore because that one kid doesn't know how to follow the rules. You all know what I'm talking about, where that one kid wouldn't listen in gym class and now everybody had to sit down and think about what we've done. I never understood that logic. How is that helping the situation? How is punishing all of us going to teach that one kid a lesson? He doesn't care about us. They need to hold themselves accountable. That's not my responsibility. And most of the time they say stuff like this because it's like, oh, well, it's your community. So, you need to start fixing stuff in your community. I'm going to just make this very clear so you know where I stand. I hate the phrase communities. I hate it. Can't stand it. Hate it with a burning passion, actually, because it implies that there is some type of unity when most of the time that is not the case. The thing about communities that I have been noticing is that everybody in it expects you to feel, do, and act in the same way that everyone else does, without question and without opinion, because every community ultimately sees themselves as this perfect, united nation. But there is no such thing as a perfect system of operation. Every single system has its flaws. That includes communities. Sometimes there are harmful rhetorics or nonsensical logic that may go through the echo chamber of a community. But anyhow you try to approach and explain these possible flaws in your community in order to try and better the community, guess what? You get kicked out of the community. If you can't criticize certain ideals that may be problematic without being ridiculed for it, that's not a community. That's a cult. And that's what a lot of communities are becoming nowadays. Every community is flawed. Every single community has flawed ideals and things that it needs to fix. Don't you think Black people have been trying to speak up about problematic behavior in the Black community? Don't you think we tried to point out certain things that don't make sense? I made a video talking about how calling a Black person whitewashed because they aren't your typical ghetto Black person doesn't make any sense. Most of the time it's because they're smart, because of the way that they talk. You talk white. That is literally reinforcing the racist stereotypes that racist people in the past would give about Black people. There isn't one right way to be Black. Or what about things like race swapping and trying to defend people who may not like it as much? And it's not that they're all just racist and they don't want to see Black people succeed, because there's also Black people who don't like it either, and it could possibly be because they don't feel that it's truly representative of Black people, or they feel like it's lazy and they want new creative stories for Black people. Black women who speak up about things like harmful but glorified stereotypes in the Black community, things like baby mama culture, baddie culture, in which these concepts are very heavy in the Black community, and that we should shy away from this adultification of young girls, that we should be encouraging nuclear family households. All of these Black people who are yelling to the world that we don't like how we are portrayed in Western media. And do you know what these people are constantly met with? You're whitewashed, you're policing Black emotions, you're kissing up to the white man, you've got internalized racism. And yes, there are many Black people who do agree with this and try to spread the message. You'll see this a lot of times in comments. It's not all negativity, but there are some Black people who simply can't fathom another ideal for the stereotypical Black person, and we get kicked out of our own community. So if we can't even speak up about our own problems in our own community, how are we supposed to hold Black people accountable? But of course, you don't care about that. You just like the idea of pointing your Cheeto-dusted fingers at everybody else on the internet and that they're the problem. You just love the idea of sitting on your throne of a moral superiority complex. Okay, it's getting dark. I don't even know if you guys can see me at this point, so I'm gonna wrap this up. What's the moral of the story? I'm trying to make people aware that both complaints from both sides are valid and understandable, but this is also a group effort here. Yes, it is simply in our programming to make schema and to put people into categories. It just makes our day-to-day life easier. If we didn't do these things, we would have to re-encode information that we had already gotten in the past. That doesn't make any sense. So this is something that is very important that we have to do, and it goes for everything: inanimate objects, certain places, and people. So certain experiences that you have in the past is going to very heavily influence the way that people react to those experiences in the future. So yes, it is completely understandable if the Japanese are wary of people who are my color because of the things that they are constantly seeing and being met with. And it's like, okay, you know what? We need to stop this altogether, because essentially they're seeing a lot of people who are Black doing this the most. If I go into a beauty supply store and I see, the cashier or the worker checking down the aisles and, glancing at me every now and then, I understand. I get it, okay? Especially because I normally go into beauty supply stores like mad early in the morning when there's nobody there, because I like to have the store to myself. If I'm by myself, I'm sitting in the aisle for a little bit too long, understandably, you're going to get suspicious. Again, I get it. I can't get upset. I understand what the numbers say, statistics, and your brain is telling you. I get it. Objectively speaking, I understand. But again, on the other hand, we need cooperation from the other side. At some point, you need to make sure those biases do not completely engulf your perspective of a certain group of people. If I'm going in your store and you want to be wary because you know that Black people have a tendency to steal a lot from beauty supply stores, that's fine, understandable. However, you do not treat me like a criminal unless I have stuffed my panties with got-to-be and run out of that store without paying. Other than that, you don't treat me like a criminal then. Because while it is a possibility, it is not an assured event. Because guess what? If you keep profiling your customers, they're not going to want to shop there. Showcased by the many really bad reviews of people saying that they just never want to go back again because nobody feels comfortable with you stalking them because you think they're going to steal because they're Black. Like, you're literally killing your own business right now. So you have to understand the way that it works from both ends. People are naturally going to be upset at the fact that they are being portrayed in a way that they, as individuals, do not act. So sometimes you have to manually check yourselves. Sometimes you also need to be objective on the other lens of things and say that, hey, even though they fit in this demographic, that doesn't mean that they have to be like this. I need to sit and wait and observe their actions as an individual. Sometimes you have to override that programming that we are all built with. And I feel like there isn't enough of this mutual understanding. It's more just so of, oh, well, a majority of people do this, so what can you expect? Like, that's the argument from one side, and the other side is, oh, well, you're racist because, you're not supposed to think that way. This thought process is normal, but it has to be checked. And the situation going on in Japan is not the first time that something like this has happened. This is going to be an ongoing conversation, which is why I wanted to use it as a perfect example of the psychological processes that we use. And that is all I wanted to talk about today. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.